Before photorealistic monsters and ray-traced shadows, horror found another way to haunt us, through pixels. Just a simple sprite, a looping sound effect, and an imagination unafraid to wander into the dark. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, a small wave of RPG Maker games spread across the internet. Simple, 2D experiences made by indie creators with a terrifying level of imagination. They didn't rely on graphics or budgets, just mood, mystery, and storytelling. These games proved one thing: fear doesn't need big budgets or insane graphics. It needs a simple game engine and imagination. These are the stories of 6 games that defined a generation of indie horror, and the dreams, nightmares, and emotions they left behind. RPG Maker was never meant to be a horror engine. It was a simple tool for turn-based adventures, but what it gave indie creators was freedom. No coding barriers, no big studios, just imagination. Between forums, YouTube Let's Plays, and creepypasta culture, these games thrived. What made them special wasn't realism, it was intimacy. RPG Maker Horror was special because of its imaginative storytelling, characters, sound design, atmosphere, music, the list goes on. Some of them were tragic, some were surreal, and some were simply unforgettable. These games often had very emotional endings that stuck with the player, either a heartwarming tale or something very dark, twisted, and depressing. I still remember and think about some of these endings to this day. Before we dive in, it's worth noting, most of the footage you'll see comes from the latest versions of these games. Originally, they were all free to play, built in the RPG Maker engine. Now, many have been remade or remastered over the years, given new visuals, sound design, and redefined mechanics. I'll show a few side-by-side comparisons throughout the video, just to remind us how these worlds originally looked inside the old RPG Maker engine. And lastly, this channel is still pretty new, and right now about 96% of people watching aren't subscribed. If you enjoy anything horror games, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow, and gets us closer to the goal of 500. There's a lot of cool, in-depth horror content coming soon that you won't want to miss. So I just want to say thank you, and your support means the world. Alright, let's start at the beginning, with the game that defined what RPG Maker horror could be. Before the genre was filled with haunted mansions, murderous dolls, and monsters chasing you through pixelated corridors, there was Yume Nikki. Released quietly in 2004 by a mysterious developer known only as Kikiyama, Yume Nikki wasn't the first RPG Maker horror game, but it was the first one that truly broke through. The one that showed what this tiny engine could do when imagination was allowed to run wild. At first glance, Yume Nikki doesn't look like a horror game at all. There are no jump scares, no dialogue, no enemies, you can't even die. But what Yume Nikki created was instead something far more disturbing. A journey into subconscious. Players control Marutsuki, a silent girl who refuses to leave her room. When she sleeps, she enters a sprawling dream world, a surreal landscape filled with strange characters, looping hallways, and imagery that feels both random and deeply personal. Every world in Yume Nikki feels like a different fragment of a fractured mind. Some are whimsical, filled with bright and odd colors and dancing figures. Others are unnerving, empty, and cold. There's no clear objective beyond exploring. collecting effects, small items that change Marotsuki's appearance, and trying to make sense of it all. But what makes Yume Nikki so unforgettable is the ambiguity. Nothing is ever explained. There's no narration, no exposition, just dream logic. Players are left to interpret what it all means. Is this a depiction of depression, isolation, trauma? Or is it simply a dream that refuses to end? The atmosphere is suffocating in its stillness. There's no background story pushing you forward, only curiosity. And that curiosity quickly turns into unease. Every sound in Yume Nikki feels deliberate. The distant hum of machinery, the muffled footsteps, the static-filled songs that loop endlessly. It captures the anxiety of being alone with your thoughts, of wandering through a dream that feels too real to wake from. Where the other games externalize their horror through story, Yume Nikki made you feel it. You aren't told what's wrong, you just know something isn't right. After exploring dozens of surreal worlds, collecting every effect, and returning home, there's only one thing left to do. The game ends not with a revelation, but with silence. No answers, no closure, just a sense that you witnessed something intimate, something that maybe you weren't meant to see. That ambiguity became its greatest strength. For years, players have debated the meaning behind Yume Nikki, what the dream symbolize, what happened to Marotsuki, and what the ending truly means. But maybe Yume Nikki was never about answers. Maybe it was about the act of wandering, of getting lost, of staring into the void and realizing the void stares back. Yume Nikki became a cult phenomenon, spreading across forums, image boards, and YouTube in the mid-2000s. It inspired a wave of dreamlike horror titles. LSD Dream Emulator, Off, Omori, and countless indie experiments all trace some part of their DNA back to Kikiyama's work. Even today, its influence can be felt in the way horror games use surrealism to express mental and emotional decay. And the fact that Yume Nikki was created entirely by one anonymous developer with no dialogue, no combat, and no clear plot, it's almost unbelievable. It proved that horror doesn't need blood or monsters. Sometimes the scariest stories are the ones we tell ourselves, deep within the subconscious, where logic fades and dreams take hold. Some horrors don't need deep lore or emotional tragedy, just one unforgettable face. Before the pixel horror boom of the 2010s, there was a game that started it all. A small, strange project shared across Japanese message boards in 2008. Its graphics were basic, its story minimal, and yet it terrified millions. Ao Oni, meaning Blue Demon, was created by an anonymous Japanese developer known only as No Props. It began as a freeware horror game made in the RPG Maker XP, featuring a group of friends exploring an abandoned mansion. What made it unforgettable wasn't the story, but what was inside the mansion. At its core, Ao Oni is simple: explore, solve puzzles, and avoid the monster. But it's the execution that made it terrifying. The blue-skinned creature, the Oni, could appear almost at any time. Chasing players through rooms and hallways with eerie persistence. It wasn't scripted in a cinematic way. It was unpredictable, which made it feel alive. Ao Oni spread through Japan's early internet like wildfire. Players recorded their reactions, shared fan art, and even began making their own versions of the monster, some serious, others comedic. When Western players discovered it a few years later, it took off again, fueled by Let's Plays that turned those blue chases into viral moments. It wasn't long before Ao Oni evolved beyond the game itself. It became a meme, a mascot of early internet horror culture, sprawling countless fan games, animations, and even a feature-length anime film. The premise is simple. A group of friends visit a mansion rumored to be haunted. Within minutes, they discover they're not alone. The player controls Hiroshi, the quiet, rational one of the group. As he searches for ways to escape, solving puzzles, finding keys, and uncovering clues about what the Oni really is. But unlike most horror games, Ao Oni doesn't build tension with elaborate cutscenes or voice acting. Its fear comes from anticipation. You never know when the creature will appear. Every door you open could be your last safe moment. There isn't a deep lore or meaning to the Ao Oni, at least not in the way Yume Nikki built theirs. Instead, Ao Oni became a kind of shared ghost story. Each player added their own interpretation, their own fan-made versions of the monster, expanding the mythos far beyond what was ever in the game itself. The Oni became a blank canvas, an internet-age boogeyman. A creature defined less by what it was and more by how it made people feel. Ao Oni paved the way for what RPG Maker horror could be. It showed that a small, free game made by one person could terrify players just as much as any big-budget title. Its influence shaped the indie horror scene for years, inspiring creators to experiment with atmosphere, unpredictability, and viral storytelling. Even today, the Oni's legacy endures. Not just as a monster, but as a symbol of early internet horror. It represents that moment when horror was passed from player to player, not through publishers or studios, but through fear itself. Ao Oni wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect, but it was unforgettable. A blue face staring from the shadows, and a reminder that sometimes the simplest nightmares are the hardest to escape. In 2012, a Japanese creator known simply as Kori released a small game made in the RPG Maker. It was called Ib, spelled I-B, and it would go on to become one of the most celebrated indie horror experiences of its time. At first glance, Ib looks unassuming, a short adventure about a young girl exploring an art museum. But what began as a simple curiosity quickly revealed itself as something haunting and deeply emotional. Ib emerged during the golden age of RPG Maker horror, a period where the genre was spreading through fan communities and Let's Play channels. But Ib stood apart. It wasn't built on shock value or jump scares. It relied on atmosphere, symbolism, and subtle storytelling. Its popularity surged after Western players discovered it through YouTube. Let's Players who showcased its eerie tone and multiple endings. Before long, Ib had achieved cult status, celebrated for doing something few indie horror titles could, making players feel more than fear. The story follows a young girl named Ib, who visits an art gallery with her parents. As she explores the exhibits, something changes. The paintings start to move, the lights flicker, and the people vanish. Soon, Ib finds herself trapped inside a distorted, living version of the gallery, where the artwork has turned hostile. The player's goal is to guide her through the surreal environments, solve puzzles, and uncover the truth behind this painted world. Along the way, she meets two other characters: Gary, an older boy who becomes a protective companion, and Mary, a cheerful girl whose presence isn't quite what it seems. What begins as a search for escape slowly becomes a story about trust, loneliness, and the fragile line between reality and imagination. Ib's brilliance lies in its restraint. The game never tells you what's happening outright. It allows the player to interpret, to fill in the blanks. Every rose you collect represents a human life, its petals falling as you take damage. Every painting has hidden meaning, every color tells a story. Red for Ib's innocence, blue for Gary's melancholy, yellow for Mary's deceptive warmth. It's visual storytelling at its most elegant. Over time, Ib became a symbol of what RPG Maker horror was, not just frightening, but beautiful. It showed that a game could evoke sadness, empathy, and wonder within the confines of a 2D engine. Its influence can be felt in countless games that came after, even modern pixel horror projects that echoed its quiet dread. In many ways, Ib isn't just a horror game, it's a reflection on art itself, how beauty and fear can coexist, and how imagination can turn something as quiet as a museum into a nightmare you can't forget. In the same year that Ib was capturing the world's attention, another RPG Maker horror game emerged. Darker, crueler, and far less forgiving. It was called The Witch's House. Developed by a creator known as Fumi, The Witch's House was released in 2012, built in the RPG Maker VX engine. Like Ib, it appeared simple on the surface. Pixel graphics, small environments, limited dialogue, but beneath that simplicity was something far more sinister. Where Ib drew you in with atmosphere and mystery, The Witch's House held your attention with danger and shock. Every room was a trap, every choice could kill you, and the only way forward was through death. The Witch's House rose to popularity during the golden age of Let's Plays, a time when viewers loved to watch creators react to sudden scares and unpredictable deaths. The game became a viral hit for exactly that reason. It was brutally unfair, but also meticulously designed. Players began to treat each death not as failure, but as discovery. Each new room was a riddle, and every death revealed a clue about how the Witch's House worked. But beyond the gameplay, the Witch's House had something else. A story that quietly unraveled into tragedy. The game follows a young girl named Viola, who wakes up alone in a mysterious forest. The only path forward leads to a large, foreboding mansion. The Witch's House. From the moment she steps inside, it's clear something is wrong. Rooms shift, walls bleed, and the furniture itself seems alive. Viola must explore, solve puzzles, and avoid death as she pieces together the story of a witch named Ellen, whose spirit still lingers in the house. At first, it feels like a straightforward haunted house story, but as you explore deeper, you begin to realize the game is hiding something. A secret so cruel, an ending so twisted, it redefines everything you've seen and leaves a pit in your stomach. Without spoiling too much, The Witch's House flips the traditional victim narrative on its head. It's not just about escaping evil, it's about understanding where evil comes from. Fumi created a story where horror isn't confined to monsters or ghosts, but to the choices of the characters themselves. The house becomes a reflection of guilt and identity, a living entity that reveals more about Viola than the player might expect. What makes The Witch's House stand out among the RPG Maker horror games is its precision. Every death is deliberate, every moment of silence feels intentional. It's a game that teaches you its rules through punishment, and then breaks those rules when you least expect it. Despite its age, The Witch's House remains one of the most loved RPG Maker horror games of all time. It embodies a core truth about the genre, that horror isn't about fear of death, but fear of understanding. Where Ebe explored beauty and melancholy, The Witch's House explored cruelty and consequence. It's not just a nightmare you survive, it's one you carry with you long after you escaped. In late 2012, the RPG Maker horror boom has reached its peak, and with it came one of the most iconic titles in the genre. A story of science, obsession, and a young girl trapped in the horrors of her own home. This is Mad Father. Developed by a Japanese creator known as Sen, Mad Father was built in the Wolf RPG editor, a close cousin to the RPG Maker, and it quickly became a cornerstone of the pixel horror era. Where games like Ebe and The Witch's House relied on atmosphere and mystery, Mad Father blended cinematic storytelling with shocking imagery. It felt grander in scope, like a gothic fairy tale turned nightmare. Mad Father spread rapidly through YouTube Let's Plays and horror forums, captivating audiences with its mix of tragedy and grotesque curiosity. It wasn't just scary, it was emotional. The story resonated with players because beneath the blood and madness, it was ultimately about family and the fear of what we inherit from those we love. The game follows Aya Drevis, an 11-year-old girl living in a large, secluded mansion with her father, a scientist conducting dark experiments in the basement. One night, the house comes alive with the screams of the dead. The reanimated bodies of her father's experiments roam the halls, and Aya must descend the mansion's depths to uncover the truth about her family. What unfolds is a blend of puzzle solving, exploration, and story-driven tension. As Aya navigates the mansion, she discovers notes, diaries, and clues that reveal the horrors her father committed in the name of science, and the emotional scars that bind their family together. Mad Father is about legacy, how the sins of the past echo through generations. Aya's father represents obsession without morality, while Aya herself becomes a reflection of innocence corrupted. The deeper she explores the mansion, the more she's forced to confront who she really is, and whether she's destined to follow her father's path. There's also a subtle commentary on love twisted by control. The relationship between Aya, her father, and her mother mirrors a cycle of dependence and deceit, where affection is poisoned by secrecy. When Mad Father released, it stood out for its cinematic presentation, full cutscenes, custom sprites, and a narrative that felt closer to an anime thriller than a simple RPG Maker horror game. Today, Mad Father remains one of the defining examples of what indie horror can achieve when it blends narrative with emotion. Beneath its gore and tragedy, Mad Father is ultimately a story about human nature, how curiosity can become cruelty, and how even the most innocent hearts can be shaped by darkness. Where Ao Oni relied on fear of the unknown, the Crooked Man found horror in something much more real: loneliness. Released in 2012 by a Japanese developer, Uri, The Crooked Man is the first entry in a loosely connected anthology known as the Strange Men series. But even among its sequels, this game stands out. Not just as a horror experience, but as a story about depression, guilt, and the weight of regret. The Crooked Man arrived near the tail end of the RPG Maker horror wave, when the genre had already found international recognition. Yet unlike the jump-scare-driven games that came before it, The Crooked Man was quiet, methodical. It felt more like a ghost story told in whispers than a spectacle of fear. You play as David Hoover, a man who's just moved into a small, empty apartment. From the beginning, something feels off. The sink drips constantly, the wallpaper peels, and at night, he hears strange noises. But the real horror doesn't come from the house itself, it comes from what David is running from. David's story is one of emotional decay. He's recently gone through a breakup. His mother is hospitalized, and he's haunted by his own sense of failure. When he begins finding clues left behind by the previous tenant, strange notes about a crooked man, David sets out to uncover the mystery. What follows is a journey across abandoned hospitals, hotels, and schools, each one mirroring his mental state, each one lonelier than the last. The Crooked Man himself is one of the most unsettling stalkers in the RPG Maker horror canon. He isn't fast, he isn't loud, he just appears, bent, broken, whispering through distorted text as he shambles towards you. But as the story progresses, you begin to realize he's not a monster in a traditional sense, he's a reflection, a distorted echo of David's own grief and hopelessness. Where other RPG Maker horror games explored external fear, The Crooked Man turned inward. It's a story about mental illness, self-worth, and the feeling of being trapped in your own life. Every location David visits, every person he meets, serves as a mirror to his struggles. The broken homes, the empty hallways, the fading voices, they're all fragments of his psyche. The game's haunting poem, the nursery rhyme about the Crooked Man, becomes a metaphor for living with imperfection. There was a crooked man, and he walked a crooked mile. The horror isn't that the man is crooked, it's that the world around him refuses to accept it. The Crooked Man didn't explode into virality the way Ao Oni or Matt Father did, but it resonated deeply with those who played it. It proved that RPG Maker horror can tell intimate, mature stories, not just about ghosts or monsters, but about human pain. The Crooked Man isn't about defeating evil, it's about facing yourself. And sometimes, that's the scariest thing of all. There's something strangely timeless about these games. Built on simple pixel art and limited engines, they managed to do what massive studios often can't. They made us feel something. They didn't rely on realism or technology. Their power came from imagination, from the way they let silence, mystery, and atmosphere fill in the blanks. Every flickering hallway, every distorted sprite, every dreamlike melody told us more about fear, loss, and loneliness than pages of dialogue ever could. And maybe that's why these pixelated nightmares still linger. Because beneath the horror, the monsters, the blood, the madness, there's always a piece of the human condition staring back at us. In the end, these weren't just games. They were digital confessions, fragments of their creators' minds shared through the dreams and code. And as long as someone out there is willing to dive into that darkness, to explore, to feel, the legacy of RPG Maker horror will never fade. Thanks so much for watching the video. If you haven't yet, please consider slashing that like button, as well as subscribing to the channel. And as always, stay safe, stay spooky, and sleep tight.